Well, hello there. It's Bradie here from Sparrow Quilt Company. Today I want to show you all the cutting I did in order to create these cute little churn dash blocks. I did a video yesterday just trying to kind of explain how these guidelines rulers work, and there was a couple of comments that they'd really like to see the fabric being cut, so no problem, here we are. I also just want to mention before I begin that these seam allowance add-ons are also available for adding to your regular ruler. So if you already have a 6x12 ruler at home, you are going to be able to add these on. You don't necessarily have to have the guidelines ruler, although I do really recommend it because it's got that cool slider and other awesome things about it. So the first thing I'm going to do is just remove the finger guard, because the seam allowance rulers clip into those same places, and don't worry, there's still a finger guard on there, so you're going to be perfectly safe. Essentially the idea is this: we're going to deal with a block and think of it in its finished size. So these blocks are 6.5 inches, but the finished size would be 6 inches. That's how big it would be when it's sewn into the quilt. So further to that, I need you to look at this and see that there's 3 rows. Each row measures 2 inches, right? Because in total, it's a 6-inch block. So we're going to divide it into those 3, and each section is going to be a 2-inch block. Make sense? I hope so. So I am going to set the slider on my ruler at the 2-inch marking, because I'm thinking about my blocks in their finished size. Now I'm going to add on this little addition, and this one is labeled with S, that stands for square, and it's got down here plus half, and that means it's adding 1/2 inch to my 2 inches, and this is going to be the seam allowance. So in order to add this on, I just have to put a little bit of dampness, aka spit, on the back of those suction cups, and then I'm going to pop these little levers into those little holes, twist the lever to lock it in place, and then just press down on that suction cup, and now my ruler is set at 2 inches plus a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, so this is going to be ready for cutting the squares, and then I'm also going to cut the rectangles, but let's start with the square. So I'm going to do a red dot center, and I'm going to lay that out on my fabric, and I'm going to bump the slider, the yellow slider, right up against the raw edge of the fabric, and then I'm going to make my cut. Now I can set this aside, and now this is ready to be turned, and I can cut out my squares for my center. So first I'm going to remove the seam allowance, because nobody wants that in their quilt. And then I'm going to bring that right over to the edge of the slider, and I'm going to make that cut. And now I've got my 2.5 inch square that is going to be the center of my block. Now I also want to cut these rectangles. They are half of that 2-inch section, so I now need to move my slider over to the 1. So I'm going to set that at the 1 and just pop it into place. It's really nice and easy. So I'm lined up with the 1, and I know that my seam allowance add-on is going to take care of the seam allowance for me. Now I'm going to butt that up, and I am going to need, I'm going to fold this in half again, and just trim off that fold quickly first. And then I can cut my rectangles. Trim that off. And now I will cut those rectangles. I'm going to need 4 in total. I've got 4 layers of fabric there, so 1 cut will do it. And there I've got my 4 rectangles. Now what I need to work on are my triangle squares. That's a half square triangle. So this seam allowance add-on, I'm going to remove it. Oh, that suction cup's really sticking today. There we go. This time I'm going to use my half square triangle seam allowance ruler. It's labeled with an H for half square triangle, and the seam allowance that it's adding this time is 0.854. Now, how would you even measure that on a regular ruler? I don't even know what 0.854 would be. I guess it would be 3/4 plus a tenth, but there's no way to measure that on my regular ruler, so I need to, typically in our patterns, we would cut them big and then trim them down. Half square triangles are a lot of work. This makes them not so much work and extremely precise. I didn't have to trim any of those. I didn't have to square anything. They came out perfect the very first time, which I really like. I love half square triangles, but they are a lot of work. So again, we'll just dampen those suction cups and we'll pop those little hole, twist the lever in place, and press down on the suctions. And now we're going to need to cut a new strip off of our fabric. And I could layer up my white and my red and do this at the same time if I wanted to get really tricky. Let's go ahead and give it a shot. So again, I didn't move my slider yet. So I was still set at 1. I need it at 2. Let's scoot that back. And just remember that you're always dealing with the finished size of your block. The seam allowance is taken care of by the add-on ruler. So I'm going to butt that seam allowance or that slider right up against the raw edge of my fabric, and I'm going to go ahead and make this cut. Get those out of the way. And now I can turn these to remove the selvage and the fold. And I've got 4 layers of each fabric here, so I only need to do a single cut. Got to be careful when you're moving that ruler over so you don't shuffle your pile and mess up all your hard work. I'm going to do this part separately, and now I'm going to cut them on the diagonal so that I get my 2 triangles out of every square. Line those up. Zip along the side there. So now I've got my triangles, I've got my dotty rectangles and squares. The last step I need are my white rectangles. So let's go back to our square for a moment. Pop off the half square triangle one. Go back to this guy. And we want a 2-inch strip, and then we're going to cut the 1 inches. That out of here. Zip up this side and take off that selvage. Now I'm going to move my slider to 1 because I know these rectangles are only half the width of that column. And in just a moment here, I'm going to show you how to lay out this block. So we've got a red dot center, and all around that we've got white rectangles. Outside of that we've got red dot rectangles. And then from there we're going to do white triangles on the inside of those outer corners. And then our last fabric is the red dot in that outer corner. And you can see there how I could sew all of that together, and then I would end up with that cute little churn dash. Can you believe that it ends up that small? It sure looks a lot bigger over here, doesn't it? Anyways, that's rulers with the add-on seam allowances. I am going to be doing a block a day for the next month, and then I'm going to have a big old sampler at the end of that. But keep watching for those videos. They're really pretty cool and quite intriguing, I think, to use these neat rulers. So if this is something that you might be interested in, go ahead and visit us at sparrowquiltco.com or click the link above this video. But either way, I hope you'll tune in and keep watching these block Stash Buster videos. Thanks for watching, guys, and bye for now.